Abroad Pod.
Hello, I'm Rowan Lomas, and this is the Teaching Abroad Pod. Today's topic is about something practically ubiquitous these days. Your favorite software programs are incorporating it. It's part of your smartphone, tablet, and computer operating systems. It's coming up in headlines related to school shootings, the stock market, the job market, and all over the education field. In fact, I attended last fall's TESOL Ontario conference, and there were many presentations on both the good and the evil of it. Can you guess what I'm referencing? It's artificial intelligence, of course, on this episode. I'll be speaking with an academic who is somewhat of an expert on the topic of AI in the education sphere, Dr. Christopher DeLuca, who is kind enough to join us for this chat.
Lovely to be here, Rowan. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Pleasure. So, just a brief introduction to you. Dr. DeLuca is a professor of educational assessment at the Faculty of Education at Queen's University. Dr. DeLuca leads the Classroom Assessment Research Team and is a director of Queen's Assessment and Evaluation Group. Previously, Dr. DeLuca was an assistant professor at the University of South Florida, Tampa, and has worked in the area of policy research in London, England. Dr. DeLuca's research examines the complex intersection of curriculum, pedagogy, and assessment as operating within the current context of school accountability and standards-based education. He's earned a Bachelor of Science from the University of Toronto, as well as Bachelor and Master Education degrees and a PhD from Queen's in Kingston, Ontario. Welcome to the pod, Dr. DeLuca.
Thanks so much, Rowan. Let's dive into the topic.
Absolutely. So, obviously, the topic of AI can be somewhat contentious. Companies and schools are having to introduce a lot of policies on its use. There's a real fear of private information becoming publicly available through its use. Some of the top AI sites have made fairly calamitous blunders with regards to the veracity of information affecting people's lives, ability to cross borders in some cases. I guess when it comes to education, while some teachers might love the ease with which they can use AI to plan a lesson, they also can struggle a bit with ensuring accountable student use of AI in their work. So my question basically is, as an educator, how can we thread the needle between responsible and irresponsible use of artificial intelligence?
Yeah, great question, Rowan. And when we're thinking about artificial intelligence and we're putting that in the context of schooling, what we really want to be thinking about is not only artificial intelligence, but real learning. So how do we ensure that we are measuring and understanding students' real learning and that teachers are engaging in real teaching? So at the center of all education is a human experience, and we want to preserve that. So while AI can be part of the equation in terms of a tool we use, it can't replace the heart of what education is all about, which is real students, their learning, and real teachers and their teaching. And so some of those cautions that you mentioned and some of those headlines that you referred to are certainly real and things that teachers and students and parents need to be aware of, that these tools are not without challenge. And so there's safety, privacy concerns that need to go into their use. And oftentimes, the AI tool itself will have clear statements as to who should be using it, age restrictions, and school boards will sanction or not sanction certain tools. And so we need to be aware of those in the classroom when we take up a tool.
And what would you say is the best way to ensure users truly do understand the potential risks as well as the benefits?
Yeah, well, I think all of that falls under a broader umbrella of digital literacy and helping learners understand how to use digital tools generally within our society and how they can understand the use of constructing, analyzing, evaluating digital information. And so anytime a teacher is using a tool, with technology in their classroom, part of that is not only how does it fulfill the assignment or the learning, but how do we understand that tool responsibly and ethically. So spending a little bit of time with the students to understand the tool's parameters. What can it be used for in this assignment? What can't? What is inappropriate use? Maybe what are the tool's limitations? And so unpacking that with students, providing some examples, and also talking to parents about that because the students are oftentimes doing this work at home. And so reinforcing those messages in the home context as well to bridge the homeschool connection.
So it's almost like you have to give a little seminar at the beginning of every course or for every assignment or just sort of regular part of regular feedback throughout the year?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's an ongoing conversation, right? I mean, in part the tools are changing so rapidly. We're introducing new AI tools. How students are using them in assignments, how teachers are seeing their use in assignment continues to evolve. And so it's an ongoing dialogue between teacher and student around how can we use AI in this assignment, in this assessment, and what are the sanctioned and maybe not sanctioned ways of using it? What are the ethical, what are the safe ways of using it? And so if that's a continuous conversation in teachers' minds and in the classroom, I think we continue to support students' digital literacy, which is part of the bigger project of just supporting good learning in classrooms these days.
That's interesting that you mentioned digital literacy, you mentioned a couple of times now, which is more and more relevant in this day and age. I know in the TESOL field, certainly it's become part of the program, not just are you teaching language literacy, but also digital literacy kind of hand in hand.
Yeah, so certainly it is part and parcel of the core competencies and skills we want our students to learn about these days. I mean, we all know even in our own lives and our own jobs, understanding the digital environment is crucial to our work. So we want to prepare students for that reality as well. At the same time, I think we want to be careful to not replace some of the core learning that maybe is not digitally based with what could be more easily facilitated through digital tools, right? There still is a need to learn some of the core content, knowledge, and skills. Then to ask the question, well, how can a digital tool, a technology enhance, make more efficient this practice? But oftentimes, in order to use a technology well, we need to know fundamentally how to do or think through a problem on our own. And so we can't simply just replace learning with the use of technology. And I think that's one of the big fears that's out there right now.
Absolutely. I saw that you co-wrote a paper called "How Can Teachers Integrate AI Within Schools," which touches on AI's usefulness for tasks involving low-order thinking, but also the deficits when it comes to high-order thinking. Could you elaborate a little bit on what that means?
Yeah, so in essence, whenever we're learning within classrooms, there's oftentimes some learning that's a little bit what we might call lower order, or those kinds of skills that are just remembering facts, definitions, basic understandings, and then higher order thinking skills where we're applying those facts, connecting concepts together, evaluating, creating, doing things that require synthesis of knowledge and the creation of new knowledge. And so the concern with AI in a lot of cases, and certainly early on, was that it was replacing students' need to do the remembering and understanding the lower order thinking. And now increasingly, there is concerns that it could replace the creating stage as well. It can create podcasts, it can create artwork, it can create music videos, it can do a lot of things that would fall under the banner of creating. So the question becomes, well, how do we ensure that we are measuring and supporting students' real learning across that spectrum from lower to higher order thinking and not the tools learning or artificial learning? And so that's a fundamental challenge that teachers are faced with and students are faced with. And so in that particular article you mentioned, we do give a few strategies to help teachers out in that area.
Some of the strategies involved something like backward design or peer fact checking. Can you expand on what that means and what other ways students could maybe present their work instead of a traditional essay that could be written by AI?
Yeah, so as you were mentioning early on in the podcast, where we were thinking about some of the headlines that come out of AI and the tools that maybe were inappropriately used, AI doesn't always get it right. And so, one of the things we encourage for students who are using AI, and when it's a sanctioned tool for an assignment, is a step is that students go in and verify the information, right? We know that there's this hallucination effect that often happens, or sometimes citations are given that are inaccurate. And so a good use of students' capacity to understand that the lower level of thinking is to go in and verify the facts that are coming through in an output from AI, and to be able to demonstrate to teachers, yes, I've checked these facts, they are true and accurate. When we take that a little bit further, we can ask the question, in what ways is this output from AI misrepresenting or accurately representing social issues, different kind of biases within society? Is it reinforcing stereotypes or dismantling them? And so we can get into a more critical conversation about what is being perpetuated or represented in the outputs of AI. And that begins to engage students in a bit more of a critical undertaking of the use of that tool. So, yes, it's very accurate that these tools can produce oftentimes summaries and facts. And so that is a good use of them, but we can't just blindly use those summaries. We need to have the capacity to be able to verify them and to be critical about what comes out of these tools. And so that's one step in this process for sure.
I liked how one of the suggestions was kind of along the lines of maybe giving more presentations of work or videos and things like that, ways that you could, I guess AI can make videos now too, but um,
Yeah.
ways that it's very clear that it is the student who is the one understanding and presenting the knowledge.
Yeah, so it's kind of under this premise of show, don't tell. And it's this idea of like, show me what you know as a student, right? And so in that way, we really are encouraging an idea of performance-based assessment, that it's one thing to represent knowledge on something that can maybe be reproduced or created through AI. It's very different if I ask you in a class to present in front of your peers, to explain in front of your peers, to maybe do a performance or do something creative or artistic that you create in class, or even if it involves AI as part of the creation process, where you document your use of AI and you show how you've expanded on what was created from AI, and maybe extended it in new ways and different ways, and now can explain that. So ultimately, what we want to see here is students' capacity to move beyond AI outputs and to explain and rationalize the decisions that were made and take responsibility for the learning within an assignment. And that parallels what we would want to see in teachers' practices if they were using AI as well. Ultimately, who is responsible for learning? Who is responsible for teaching? Going back to a human-centric way of thinking about education, it's the student and it's the teacher.
And I know a lot of teachers, especially in post-secondary, but probably other levels as well,
Mhm.
are using kind of AI detector type tools to look at student work and see how likely it is that plagiarism occurred. How effective are those?
Yeah, so there's various research on their effectiveness, a little bit different at different levels, different tools and at different levels of education. And there's different research on teachers' capacity to detect themselves whether something is AI generated or not. So the challenge we have here is, yes, those might be an indicator that student has used AI, but we're always then in this cycle of trying to catch a cheater, right? It's that sort of catching plagiarism. And rather than being in that responsive approach, it might be useful to think more proactively about this and think about the fact that AI is part of the landscape, is part of the tools that are available to students, is part of the likelihood that they might access those tools in completing an assignment, and ask the question, how might I build that assignment, knowing that that tool is out there, and knowing that I might be able to design an assignment that integrates it as part of a stage in the development of this work. And what kind of safeguards, steps, strategies, feedback opportunities might I put in place so that I don't have to catch it after the fact, but can actually support learning during the assignment?
What strategies could teachers use to ensure something like their rubric, the criteria that they're setting, do require higher order thinking that the A may not be reasonably able to reproduce?
Yeah, so I think that part of that goes back to what are we asking students to do in the first place? So how are we defining the task? Good strategy around that is also talking to students about what assignment they want to do and what task they want to do. Engaging them in that very process is helpful to sort of reestablish what is the activity that students are engaged in, because if they're engaged in the activity, they're more authentically going to complete it. And then establishing opportunities for feedback along the way and setting criteria that involves both the final product, but also some criteria about, how did you use AI and how did you move beyond the AI output. So actually looking for, if we've purposely built AI into the assignment, looking for students' capacity to use AI effectively in this assignment. So building it in as a learning goal as well. And that goes back to the digital literacy sort of goals that we're setting now for our students. So if this is now part of the assignment, then we should be looking for it in terms of our assessment of learning. And when we do that, we're being proactive. We're not being responsive.
Excellent. All right. You kind of touched earlier on the fact that some of these programs, websites, whatnot, have age restrictions or recommendations. But I guess I'm just wondering, at what student age or grade is this really a topic that should be addressed with learners?
Yeah. It seems to me like it's getting younger and younger, the conversation, and where we're seeing students using this AI tools. And so I don't know that there's a definitive age in which we can say, start having this conversation, but I think we need to ask ourselves the question of, what assignments are we giving students? Is AI susceptible to be used in those assignments? Is it appropriate to have a conversation about that? And that might be in grade three, it might be in grade six. So it's about teachers' understanding of, are we preparing students to do this assignment well? And in doing that, is a conversation about digital tools and literacy something we need to have?
Look at the assignment and what are ways students could be completing this assignment, and if
Mhm.
that's something that may be in their wheelhouse or they think it
Mhm.
is, a
Yeah,
good conversation to have. Okay.
yeah, sure.
I guess just to play devil's advocate, as high school students are known to do, why is it okay for teachers to use AI to do their work for them, but not for students? How is that fair?
Yeah. So it's a great question, and you do hear it in the halls of high schools every once in a while. So I think the reality is teachers do use it sometimes to help plan lessons and sometimes to create assignments. But ultimately, just like we would expect to see for students' work, the responsibility is on the teacher to make the decision to teach, to grade, to communicate learning. And the responsibility needs to remain with the teacher because we can't hold the AI tool responsible in these decisions, right? And it's the teacher's job to do this work. So, you know, just like a student can use any number of tools to complete an assignment, oftentimes the teacher has access to a number of professional resources to support their work. And now AI is emerging as one of those as well. But ultimately, the teacher is making decisions, and they're making decisions about what comes out of that AI tool and if they want to use it or if they need to modify it. And oftentimes, you need to modify it and you need to adapt it. In a very similar and parallel way to students' use of AI, the responsibility is on the individual. And they're not, I don't think teachers are just oftentimes taking what AI is giving them and using it outright. I think there needs to be an adaptation and there needs to be decision points.
That's true. It's a good point. It's ultimately up to you, the individual, to verify its
Mhm,
accuracy and to
mhm.
use it a way that is beneficial. And I mean, you could even go back a long way to probably when you or I were young, and nobody was saying, don't use spell check, don't use grammar
Yep.
check in
Yep.
your Microsoft Word production. So
Mhm.
yeah, I guess we just have to evolve a little bit with the technology and learn how to use it well and to the best of our abilities so that the students are ultimately learning and it's not taking away that capacity from the student.
Yep.
All right. Well, is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners before you go?
No, I mean, I just think that this is such an important topic and it's a space of constant change, right? So as we continue to have these conversations, it is an opportunity to continue to question, to unpack, to be critical about AI. It certainly isn't sort of a solution to everything, and it certainly has a lot of cautions and concerns around it. And so having these kinds of podcast opportunities for teachers to have conversations about its use and to raise these critical questions is essential. And we'll see where it all goes.
Thank you so much. Very well said. It was a pleasure having you on the pod today. You can find a link to Dr. DeLuca's article, How Can Teachers Integrate AI Within Schools? 5 Steps to Follow, as well as an Oxford Seminars blog entitled Top 10 AI Tools for the Classroom, which features some great lesson planning and student AI use detection tools in this episode's description on YouTube. Thanks as always for tuning in to the Teaching Abroad pod. We'll be releasing new episodes monthly for the foreseeable future. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to like and subscribe, and of course, share it with your friends. Remember, you can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all the usual places. If you have any great ideas you'd like to hear us discussed in upcoming episodes, please leave them in the comments on YouTube or email us at teachingabroadpod@oxfordseminars.com. Thanks for listening.